My sister-in-law said, "You'll never wear that ring." When I got engaged, but when I revealed the family heirloom, she smashed her glass. Then my mother-in-law walked in. So here's the thing. I never really thought I'd be telling this story publicly, let alone in an online forum, but here we are. I guess I need some advice or maybe just someone to listen. So, buckle up, because this is a wild one. A little background first. My name's Liz, and I'm 37 years old, working as an ER nurse here in Philly. Long hours, a few too many energy drinks, and a lot of adrenaline. I'm not a fancy person. My family's blue collar, we work hard, we don't complain, and we never think twice about it. That's just who we are. Then, 3 years ago, Jacob walked into my life, and everything changed. We met in, of all places, the ER. He came in needing stitches after a softball accident. Some guy had slid right into him, cleats up. I still remember his grin through the pain as I cleaned him up. "I don't even feel it," he'd said, chuckling. "You're a miracle worker." "Oh, please," I'd replied, laughing. "I just put a bandage on a scraped-up ego." He laughed, and I felt that spark. 2 weeks later, he asked me out, and we clicked like nothing I'd ever known. He was charming, thoughtful, and different from the men I'd dated before. He came from a family with money, though he never flaunted it. But, oh, did his family know it? The Winters family had money. Old money. They'd been here in Philly since the Revolutionary War, practically. His mother, Eleanor Winters, is the kind of woman who attends charity events in pearls and sips gin and tonics with people who could buy a small island. Jacob was the youngest of 3, with an older brother, Derek, and a sister, Callie, who I'm convinced was born with a silver spoon in her mouth, and maybe even an attitude to match. Don't get me wrong. Callie's smart, well-spoken, and, I admit, beautiful. She's one of those people who knows exactly how to dress, how to act, and how to say just the right thing. But I always sensed that she never really liked me. Maybe I wasn't Winter material. Maybe I didn't know how to play the game. I wasn't sure, but she never missed an opportunity to remind me that I was an outsider. Now, fast forward to a month ago. Jacob proposed, and I was over the moon. It was a quiet proposal, just us, at the art museum steps, his voice shaky as he held out a small, weathered velvet box. "It's Nana's ring," he said, smiling as he watched my expression. "It's been in the family for generations. I want you to have it, Liz." It was beautiful, a delicate sapphire with tiny diamonds, set in an intricate vintage gold band. I was honestly speechless. Here I was, a nurse from the outskirts of Philly, now the soon-to-be fiancé of a Winters, wearing the Winters heirloom ring. It was surreal. When I said yes, Jacob practically tackled me with a hug, and it felt like everything I'd ever wanted was finally coming true. A week later, we had our first family lunch since the engagement. It was supposed to be a simple get-together, but knowing the Winters, simple wasn't really their style. Eleanor's place, no, mansion, is this old Victorian on Spruce Street, with huge ceilings, elaborate crown molding, and a dining room that looks like it was straight out of a historical drama. Walking in there with that ring on my finger, I felt a little like Cinderella at the ball. Nervous, but hopeful. We walked in, and Callie was the first to spot the ring. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned my hand, a tight, forced smile stretching across her face. "Oh, that's the ring, is it?" she asked, her voice a little too sugary. I nodded, trying to keep it casual. "Yep. Jacob gave it to me last week." Callie laughed, a quick, short sound that didn't reach her eyes. "I just didn't expect him to give that ring away so soon. It's just wow." Jacob bristled next to me. "What's that supposed to mean, Cal?" "Oh, nothing, she said, waving a hand dismissively. "I just thought, that some things stay in the family." Her eyes darted to my ring again, and then back to me with a little smirk. "But hey, I guess we all move on eventually." I didn't know what to say, so I just gave a tight smile and thanked her. Inside, though, my stomach was in knots. We sat down to lunch, and I could feel Callie's eyes on me the entire time, like a hawk sizing up a mouse. She kept asking pointed questions about the wedding, about our plans, subtly implying that maybe Jacob and I were rushing into things. Every word she said had this edge, like she was just waiting for me to slip up and show her that I didn't belong. Finally, as dessert was being served, Callie cleared her throat dramatically. I was just thinking," she started, giving her mother a meaningful look. "It's interesting that Jacob gave her Nana's ring." Eleanor, ever the picture of calm, gave her daughter a disapproving glance. "And why, pray tell, is that interesting, Callie?" "Oh, nothing, Mom," Callie replied, her voice dripping with fake innocence. "I just thought Derek might be saving it for someone special. Like, Melissa." Melissa was Derek's long-term girlfriend, and as far as I knew, they hadn't even talked about marriage. "So, this little bomb Callie just dropped?" I could feel my face flush. Jacob's fork clattered against his plate. "Melissa and Derek aren't even engaged, Callie." Callie shrugged, her eyes flashing with satisfaction. I just thought. You know. That some people might be more traditional. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. Callie, if you have something to say, just say it, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Oh, I think I've made myself clear, she replied smoothly. You're not exactly one of us, Liz. You're wearing Nana's ring, but I'm not sure you really understand what it means. Eleanor looked horrified. Callie, that's enough. Jacob's voice was tight. Liz is part of this family now, Callie. And she deserves that ring as much as anyone. Callie scoffed, looking away. Right. Of course she does. Well, maybe some people just can't help where they came from. The room went dead silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting to see what I'd do, what I'd say. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think straight, but I knew one thing, I wasn't going to let Callie win. I took a deep breath and looked her right in the eyes. You know, Callie, you're right. I did come from a different background. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth, and maybe I don't know all the rules of your world. But I love Jacob, and that's what matters. Callie's mouth opened to retort, but before she could say anything, Eleanor cleared her throat sharply. Callie, that's enough. Liz is part of our family now, and if you can't support that, then maybe you should think about what family means. For once, Callie looked like she'd been slapped. She opened her mouth to say something but thought better of it, snapping her lips shut and glaring down at her plate. A few days later, Callie called me out of the blue, inviting me for coffee. I almost didn't go, but I thought maybe, just maybe, she was calling to apologize. I got there, and she was already seated, swirling a glass of wine at a cafe that didn't even have a liquor license. She'd brought her own bottle, which, if anything, told me how intense this conversation was about to get. As soon as I sat down, she cut straight to the chase. Look, Liz, she began, her voice icy. I'm going to be honest with you. That ring. It was supposed to go to Melissa. I raised an eyebrow, trying to keep my voice steady. Last I checked, Melissa isn't part of this family, Callie. And you think you are? She sneered. You think you can just walk in here, after a few years with my brother, and claim a part of our family history? Jacob gave it to me because he wanted me to have it, I shot back. This isn't about family history. It's about Jacob's choice. She laughed, a cold, hollow sound that made my skin crawl. Choice? Oh, please. Jacob's impulsive, Liz. We've all seen it. This little phase with you? It'll pass. And when it does, that ring will go to the real Winters woman it was meant for. That was it. I'd had enough. I stood up, leveling her with a glare. You don't get to decide whose family, Callie. That's Jacob's choice. And I'm here to stay whether you like it or not. I could see the shock in her eyes, like she wasn't expecting me to stand up to her. I walked out of that cafe feeling a strange sense of triumph, even as my heart pounded and my hands shook. A week later, we all gathered at Eleanor's for a formal family dinner. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I wore the ring proudly, refusing to let Callie get to me. Callie spent the entire evening sending me little smirks and snide remarks, but I kept my cool, ignoring her best attempts to get under my skin. Finally, toward the end of the meal, as we were talking about wedding plans, Callie raised her glass dramatically. To family tradition, she said, staring at me with that mocking glint in her eye. And to making sure our family history stays in the family. It was so absurd, so over the top, that I actually laughed. Callie, what exactly are you trying to say? Oh, nothing, dear, she replied with that insufferable sweetness. Just that some people have no idea what they're getting into. And then, out of nowhere, she squeezed her wine glass so hard it shattered, the stem snapping in her hand. Blood trickled down her fingers as everyone gasped, and in the midst of the chaos, Eleanor stormed over, her eyes blazing. Enough, Callie, Eleanor said, her voice shaking with anger. Liz is part of this family, and if you can't accept that, then maybe you're the one who doesn't belong here. Callie looked up, stunned, her face pale as she stared at her mother. I held my breath, feeling a strange sense of relief as Eleanor turned to me and gave a small, supportive nod. And at that moment, I knew I was home. After Eleanor's words, the silence in the room was thick. Callie looked like she'd been slapped. Blood trickled from her hand, but she didn't even flinch, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to find something to say. Everyone else was frozen, watching her. Finally, she stammered, Mom. You don't mean that. Eleanor, calm but visibly annoyed, raised an eyebrow. Oh, I mean every word, Callie. Your behavior is unacceptable, and frankly, I'm embarrassed for you. Jacob is happy. We should be happy. But instead, you've made this all about you and some petty jealousy over an old ring. Jacob's brother, Derek, who'd been quiet the whole night, suddenly spoke up. Honestly, Callie, I don't even know what your problem is. You act like you own everything in this family, and it's exhausting. He looked at her with an edge I hadn't seen before, frustration clear on his face. Melissa doesn't care about the ring. She doesn't care about any of it. But you do. Why? You're not even engaged. The word stung, and I could see the fire ignite in Callie's eyes. She slammed her napkin on the table, standing up so quickly her chair nearly toppled over. "You're all ridiculous," she spat, her voice shaking. "I'm the only one who actually cares about this family. I'm the only one who takes our traditions seriously." "But fine," she sneered, shooting me a death glare. "Let her have the stupid ring. Let her have all of it. But don't come crying to me when you realize what a mistake this all is." She turned on her heel, storming out of the dining room, and for a second, I felt my heart hammer with fear. She might actually leave and never come back. Jacob gripped my hand, his thumb rubbing soothing circles into my palm, and I realized that everyone in that room, was watching me. A small voice in my head whispered, "You're safe here." And just like that, the knot of tension unraveled. I was done. Done walking on eggshells, done putting up with Callie's nonsense, and done with her warped vision of what family meant. The next day, Eleanor called me early in the morning, her voice bright. "Liz, dear, I'd love to see you today. I have something for you." Curious, I agreed, and a few hours later, I found myself back in that same old Victorian, seated in Eleanor's study. She had a small box in her lap, wrapped in deep blue velvet. "After last night, I realized something," Eleanor said, her gaze warm but firm. "You're going to be a Winters, Liz. Truly. And I'd like to welcome you with something special." She handed me the box, watching as I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a stunning sapphire necklace, an heirloom, much like the ring, with matching vintage gold filigree, intricate and breathtaking. "Eleanor. I don't know what to say." She patted my hand. "I want you to wear it at your wedding. Callie has always felt entitled to the family jewels, but these pieces aren't hers any more than they are anyone else's." Her lips curled into a mischievous smile. "Besides, I think it's high time someone in this family started treating you with the respect you deserve." I was nearly speechless, but I managed a grateful smile. "Thank you, Eleanor. This means the world to me." "Oh, don't thank me yet," she said, a twinkle in her eye. "There's something else we should discuss. The bridal brunch." Fast forward a few weeks, and it was time for the bridal brunch that Eleanor had planned. It was a pre-wedding tradition in the Winters family, an intimate affair with just close family and friends, a celebration before the big day. I arrived in a simple but elegant dress, wearing the sapphire necklace Eleanor had gifted me. She'd advised me to dress up a bit, and I had a feeling she had something up her sleeve. When I walked in, Eleanor hugged me tightly and whispered, "I invited Callie. Be patient." Callie arrived a few minutes later, clearly thrown off when she saw me wearing the family sapphire. Her eyes darkened, and she forced a smile, shooting Eleanor a look of pure venom. She took a seat, trying to play it cool, but she couldn't stop glancing at the necklace. The brunch was lovely, with Eleanor telling everyone sweet stories about Jacob's childhood, the family's history, and the meaning behind different family heirlooms, little anecdotes that painted Jacob as the golden-hearted man I knew him to be. Then, halfway through, Eleanor rose, glass in hand, and gave me a significant look. "Now," Eleanor began, her voice warm but firm, "I want to officially welcome Liz into our family." The guests clapped, and I felt a blush creeping up my cheeks. Callie's smile was so tight it looked painful. "As we all know," Eleanor continued, looking pointedly at Callie, "Liz has been given Nana's ring, an heirloom that has been with the Winters family for generations." Everyone was watching Callie now, and she could barely keep her composure. She started to interject, but Eleanor held up her hand. "It's tradition in this family to pass along treasures, things with meaning. But this necklace, which Liz is wearing today." Eleanor's voice trailed off as she looked at me with a soft smile. "It belonged to my mother. She left it to me, and I always intended for it to go to a woman who exemplifies strength and grace." Callie's face twisted with shock, and she couldn't hold back any longer. "You never said that, Mom. You never told me." "No, Callie," Eleanor replied coolly, "I didn't. Because it was never yours. I was waiting for the right person, and I know now that Liz is that person." I could barely breathe as Callie's face turned red. She looked furious, but she was cornered. She huffed, barely able to manage, "But I thought. I mean, it's family tradition." "Family tradition," Eleanor replied, her voice ice cold, "is not entitlement, Callie. And if you spent less time fixating on heirlooms and more time being kind, maybe you would understand that." The room went silent, all eyes on Callie, who looked humiliated beyond belief. She stood up, muttering something about needing air, and stormed out of the room. As soon as she was gone, everyone burst into polite applause. Eleanor winked at me, lifting her glass. "To family, and to new beginnings." When the wedding day finally arrived, I felt like I was stepping into a fairy tale. I wore the sapphire necklace proudly, the ring gleaming on my finger, knowing I'd earned my place in this family. Callie attended but kept to herself, her attempts to ruin the day feeble and barely noticed. After the ceremony, during the reception, I had a quiet moment with Eleanor. She took my hands and said, "You're exactly what this family needed, Liz. Don't ever forget that." Callie's presence faded into the background as I danced with Jacob, knowing that we'd overcome her toxicity and finally found our peace. The Winters family had accepted me fully, and I knew that Callie's bitterness would never touch us again. Several months later, I heard through the grapevine that Callie had tried to reclaim the sapphire necklace. She showed up at Eleanor's, feigning innocence, but Eleanor shut her down, reminding her that she'd given it to me, and that it would stay in my family for generations to come. Apparently, Callie's face had been priceless. In the end, I'd finally earned my place. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger. Eleanor had seen the real me, and the real Callie. And she'd put her in her place without me even needing to say a word. I left that chapter behind, fully accepted as a Winters, with Callie's futile resentment only making my bond with Jacob and his family stronger. And every time I glanced at that sapphire necklace or the ring on my finger, I knew I'd finally found my family. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply living well, surrounded by love.